Led the British Armored Division in the First Gulf War. He was also commander of the United Nations forces in Bosnia, as well as Deputy Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. And he's got a yellow belt in judo. His new book is called The Utility of Force, The Art of War in the Modern World. You, sir, served for how many years?
Just under 40, a few months under 40 years.
Why do you look better than me?
Because I've retired.
I will join you soon, sir. Soon! You write that our knowledge of warfare, the way that we see it since World War II, is completely different than how we are tactically planning for war. And that's, World War II ended in 45. So that's, how many years? 60?
Getting on.
What are we waiting for?
A major institutional change is we've got to stop thinking about war in the way that we have done up till now. And the major change is to understand in the new model of war, or the model that we're in now, that the object is not going to be achieved directly by military force. The old way of doing things is that you set out to win a war and solve your problem by force. We can't do that now.
Books suggest that we just have to be more surgical in our use of force, that force is to be used to almost begin diplomacy or to heighten diplomacy.
It is part of diplomacy instead of being used in a serial fashion. In the old way of thinking about it, we went in a nice, tidy, linear fashion. Peace, crisis, war, resolution, peace. Now, we live in a world in which you have to do them all together. And your military acts are there to influence the results that you want in the negotiation or the confrontation or the diplomacy, or the politics, whichever word you wish to use to describe that.
But in your thinking, then, didn't our original taking of Baghdad, wouldn't that have been a very useful item in terms of diplomacy? For instance, you knock out that government, and then you say, so we should really sit down and talk about this.
But we didn't, did we?
Well, no, we didn't. We sent in other guys.
Our object was to produce a government that we approved of. However we cared to define that. Now, that involves the Iraqi people. To remove their existing government, and then suppose we've won, is to not understand the objective, which was to arrive at a government that was to be elected by the Iraqi people, that they approved of and could live with. And
but how can you ever go into someone else's country and, let's say, I mean, let's talk about the American Revolution for a second, because obviously, you know, at that time, this would have been obviously a different conversation. I would have been on your show. But let's say that in the American Revolution, the French had decided that America should be free. And they come in and they knock out the British and then write our Constitution for us and then give it to us. Doesn't that not give your country any kind of a foothold? A story to tell yourselves, patriotically as people, about having a government that's going to be of you and by you and for you. And you know what? I'm not even sure what I just said. And yet, very impressive.
Let's analyze what you've just said. First of all, the situation isn't quite the same. The American Revolution was a revolution.
Right.
It was all one country to start with. It was then a war with the British as it came to be called.
That's what I'm
Everyone
suggesting.
was British to start with, if you follow me. So that
Right.
broke out. And the French did become involved.
No, they were. But they were a side dish. They did not decide to overthrow Britain, is what I'm suggesting.
They were very much threatening it, which is one of the reasons why large quantities of the Royal Navy were sitting in the Channel to make sure that didn't happen and not over here.
Really?
Yeah. Read your history.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing, though. here's the thing. I've read mine. I'm just not that interested in yours.
Exactly so. And what's happened is that the narrative is dictated by the winner.
Right.
And so here you have a narrative that, by and large, tells you that that's what's happened. Now, in our modern war, to win, you have to dictate the narrative not after the event, but during the event.
I see.
So that everyone can see that you're winning.
So you're saying that doing it on false pretenses, or what would seem to be a facade, would not be the way to go?
Oh, that does not help you to produce a narrative that is compelling and going to win your position.
So militarily, we had it all covered. We did not write a good story. We did not sell it properly, and thus created our own storylines that began to spin out.
You haven't told it very well to yourselves.
No.
Let alone to your allies across the Atlantic.
Is there a way to retell it? Is there a way to, I'm not suggesting necessarily spinning the earth the other way and having, but is there something that people do in this situation?
Not easily now. I think we're up the creek and we haven't got the shot.
Everybody always shows up after the fact. The Utility of Force is on the bookshelves now. General Rupert Smith. Sir?